would take us hours and hours to hike a couple of miles because we were wearing these giant backpacks that were like 60, 70 pounds, which was like half of our body weight as teenagers. We were also not just in Utah in the winter, we were in the Uinta Mountains. Twice a week, we had quote-unquote Billy bath days, which was our only available form of washing. 2 tins of water, about the size of this tissue box, and we had 15 minutes to stand in the literal dirt on the ground. If you were dirty enough for long enough, the dirt starts like adhering to your skin, and you can't get it off. If you were sick, they just ignored you. My friend and I both got either really bad colds or the flu or something at the exact same time, accuse you of faking it, of saying you're trying to get out of hiking by being sick, and they made us hike anyways. And then a constant was a feedback group, which was honestly a form of attack therapy. Someone would say, I'd like to call a feedback group, and everyone else had to stop what they were doing immediately and gather around the person. You know, Alexandra, are you open to hearing feedback? And you couldn't say no. Technically you could be like, no, I'm not, but then the person would call another group like 3 hours later and say, are you now open to receiving feedback? And the person's feedback could be anything. And you had to sit there and say, okay, like, thank you for your feedback. They told us that we couldn't experience anger, that anger was a secondary emotion. Expressing anger was a sign that we had to stay in the program longer because we were less developed emotionally, but it also worked because it made us much more compliant. At my first program, I went in, I was like, my parents are abusive. I have documentation of it. And my therapist at my first program told me that I was playing the victim and I wouldn't be able to leave until I wrote a letter of accountability where I took accountability for the role I played.
What?
In my parents treating me like this.
Mine is the only voice.
Wow. What have I been doing?
Lay down my autonomy.
After that, it got very dark very quickly. Hey guys, my name is Shalise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening on those podcast platforms and you would prefer to see our faces and support our show in the best way you possibly can, go to YouTube at Cults to Consciousness. Any way that you interact with the post really, really helps us out, guys. And it also helps bring awareness to these groups by telling the algorithm that you want to see more of this, and it pushes it to a brand new audience every time you watch it. So it really helps us get more exposure for not only these groups, but for our guests who are bravely coming on and sharing their stories. Today's guest, she recently did an unmasking. She's been talking on her social channels for 4 years now about the troubled teen industry, 2 different camps that she was sent to. Her parents paid for her to be kidnapped, and she didn't know what was going on. We'll get into all of the things that she had to go through. One was a wilderness camp, another one was an academy, and how she was separated from her family, treated horribly, and the ramifications that came with that. So thank you so much for joining us, Alexandra.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be on.
Me too. I'm excited for this. I've been following you for a while now, since you always had the bandana, your trail seasoning on your Instagram and probably TikTok too, right? I'm not on TikTok anymore.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm just out of the loop with TikTok now, but I know it's still popping over there. So you just did an unmasking where you're like, okay, guys, this is me, this is my face, and this is my name, which was a really big deal. It went viral, which I was so happy for you. And people were tagging us. I'm like, I know, guys, we're already on it. So that was a big deal for you.
It was, and I don't have a better answer for people as to why I did it other than it was time.
Yeah.
I felt like for the first couple of years, the mask really helped me. And then as it got to my junior and senior year, as I suppose, healed a little bit more, I felt like it was impeding me, actually. It was stopping me from sharing all I wanted to as I became more comfortable with online in the internet space. And I wanted to share more of my life and myself because my life is more than just the worst thing that ever happened to me, you know?
Yeah.
And I wanted other people to know that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we're going to get into why you wore the mask as we go through your interview. And also things that we're going to cover today, just so people know, is what could a child possibly do to deserve being sent to any of these camps? We've covered troubled teen industry before. You've done a whole video on this about, okay, why are we even talking about this as an option? And then at the end, we're going to get into better alternatives for your child or your children if they're having issues and problems. You're worried for their safety. You want to, I don't know, snap them into awareness or make sure that they're whipped into shape. Let's talk about the better alternatives than actually physically and mentally and emotionally torturing them at some wilderness camp. And yours specifically was in Utah, which is interesting to me because obviously I grew up Mormon in Utah. If people know the channel, I guess obvious it's not obvious if you don't know the channel. And I think it'll be interesting to see if there's any type of crossover into Mormonism or the doctrine or the way that they tried to implement things, if it has any correlation. So let's just dive right into it. Let's start with your childhood. Tell everybody a little bit of your background, where you're from, and what your home life was like before you got sent to this camp.
So I was born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky. I get more of a Southern drawl as soon as I start talking about the South. I was born and raised in Kentucky. My parents have also a younger son, but I was the first kid and I'm the only daughter. I was a pretty good kid. I was very high achieving. My brother required a little bit more motivation to like get things done, do homework. I was very self-sufficient. My parents were quite strict. I was allowed to have 30 minutes of screen time a day. They could take my phone and look through it whenever they wanted, and they would also take it away for like weeks at a time. It's difficult to talk specifically about my relationship with my parents without getting into stuff they've done that absolutely like would not paint them in a good light. So I'm just gonna leave it at they were very strict growing up, and it was quite difficult for me.
Well, I think that's very kind of you to give them that pass, considering what they've put you through. But it's your story, however you want to tell it. I'm here.
Yeah. I was always quite an anxious kid just because of my parents' strictness and like expectations for me, as well as that I think I'm just naturally pretty high energy. And when you are very high energy, I think it can very easily translate into having a lot of anxiety because you're just having so many thoughts so quickly and eventually they become negative. When I was 15, I went to a summer camp and I was sexually assaulted. And that is when my mental health really took a turn for the worst. Not even necessarily because of the assault, but because afterwards, the kids at my camp didn't believe me and they started bullying me. And then a little while after, I called my parents, which we really like weren't allowed to do. It was like a special situation for me. But I called them and I said, I am really struggling here and I want to go home. And my parents said, but if you leave the camp, that means that the kid who assaulted you has won, quote unquote. He won. And it was a sleepaway camp. So I stayed for another 3 weeks. And that is when I developed an eating disorder and I began self-harming just because I felt, you know, those birds who are in a cage that's too small and they start picking out all of their feathers because they're so stressed. That's what I felt like. It was like I had so little control over my life because I was stuck somewhere. And then I felt like the people upon whom I was supposed to rely and were supposed to protect me had failed.
Yeah.
So after that, my mental health definitely got worse. It was an interesting dichotomy because I was going into my sophomore year of high school. My mental health was the worst it had ever been. And that year I won an award from the school for being the student of the month. I'd missed less than 5 days of school, so the county sent my parents a letter that was like, you have a star student because they've missed less than 5 days of school and they have an A average. So it was this very interesting mix of inside I was really, really struggling, and
Yeah.
externally I seemed fine.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry that happened to you.
No,
What were the
thanks.
adults at the camp doing to protect you? Or did they also not believe what had happened? Did the person who assaulted you get any sort of repercussions, or were they sent away, or were they kept there?
The person who assaulted me was sent away, but his friends were still there. I was like pretty new to the camp, and this person was like established. He was quite popular. He was a student athlete. He had a lot of friends. So it was, you know, me who was new and also like very painfully shy and kind of didn't speak to people versus this like incredibly popular athlete who'd been there for
Mhm.
years. The female staff counselors were better about it. The male counselors also weren't great. And a lot of it was because, you know, the kids in the camp were like 15, 16, 17, and the male counselors were 17, 18.
Oh, geez.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's not really a trusted adult.
Yeah. So I think there was a lot of overlap in their thinking patterns about me and what an appropriate reaction to that situation was.
I was wondering about that camp because I feel like that also in some ways sets the tone for going to another camp where it's punishment based. And if the way that they responded to that happening to you kind of set the tone for this is how I'm treated when I go to these camps, or I don't really have a voice, or people aren't protecting me. But it sounds like they did do what they could in some ways to make you feel safe, even though the kids were still bullying you.
Yeah, so the management of the camp did send the other kid away. They talked to the students about what consent was, which they hadn't ever done before.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was like someone else did do the best they could.
Yeah.
I think others could have done better.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that is a theme, is me sort of feeling trapped and unable to escape the situation I'm in, and also the adults who I felt were there to protect me are not doing it.
Was this a religious camp, or did your parents just want you to stay just to keep you there? And I'm trying to get an idea of what you were doing there at the camp, if it was like a fun thing, if it was a religious thing and they didn't want you to come home because of that reason.
Oh no, it was a fun thing. It was very classic summer camp. Like, we had a lake, we had campfires, we rode horses. Like, just, it wasn't anything important to them. It was just like a very classic summer camp.
Okay. When you got home then, their reaction, did they try to get you any sort of counseling or help after the incident, or what was their reaction to the assault itself and helping you with it, helping you cope with it?
They bought me a psychology textbook.
A textbook. Okay. Was that helpful?
No, it was just because they knew I liked psychology. We didn't really talk about emotions in my house, so this was their, like, consolation gift. I did specifically request to be sent to counseling, and my therapist was just she was terrible. I kept saying that I wasn't comfortable talking about the assault, and she kept pushing me and told me that I would rot from the inside out if I didn't talk about it to her. And then she told me that it was my fault that I was depressed and lonely.
What?
Yeah, and I was 15, so that was really hard to hear because I was like, I'm trying?
Yeah. How did she gather that that was your fault that you were depressed?
I have no idea. I I truly don't know.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You didn't really feel like you were getting the support you needed. It sounds like your parents maybe did the best that they could with what they knew was best, but it just wasn't enough for what you needed at the time.
It wasn't enough. Also, I mean, before I was assaulted, really since I was 13 or 14, I would go to my parents and I'd say, "Hey, I think there's something going on with me mentally. I'd really like to see a psychiatrist and talk about medications
Oh.
and diagnoses." And every time my parents said no.
And that's from a child's perspective. So for you having the awareness that something was off really says something, that you were paying attention, noticing. Looking back, do you have any sort of idea of what it might have been?
Oh, I was, at the very least, I was depressed. So my therapist was partially right about that, I suppose. I was definitely depressed. I had, like, extreme anxiety. Like, I would get so anxious and nauseous, I would throw up just because.
I wonder why they allowed you to get counseling but didn't allow you psychiatric care.
My parents, they've come around recently. Growing up, they were very much against medications, especially for mental health. They were very against diagnoses. Mom had a whole thing about, if I want to get hired somewhere, they're going to look up my medical records and then not hire me, which isn't legal.
Yeah.
Like, a company can't just be like, "Okay, hand over your psychiatric records."
Yeah.
So I think they might have experienced a lot of shame over, because they were very big on, our family has to look perfect.
Okay.
So I think they honestly experienced a lot of shame. They're both boomers, so it was a lot of, like, it's not mental health, like, it's just, you're just a kid and you're a teenager and, like, this is all normal. And I'd say, like, I don't think throwing up because of nerves is normal. Like, but for a little bit I did. I just, because my parents told me, like, this is a normal way that teenagers feel, I just went around thinking that everybody is vomiting because of stress and thinks everyone hates them all the time. And everyone's just dealing with it a lot better than I am, which was also quite difficult for me, because then I would go through these mental spirals of, like, well, then what's wrong with me? Like, why why am I not stronger? Why am I not better? Why am I not dealing with this in a better way?
Did you ever confide in friends to see if that was their experience or to tell them what you were experiencing?
Past middle school, I had very few friends. I had even fewer friends whom I felt I don't think I told anyone whom I could speak to honestly about self-harm or my eating disorder. Just because my parents would also tell me that, like, that nobody likes me, that everybody hates me, that I would never have any friends.
Wait,
Yeah.
what? Why? So were they consistently emotionally abusive to you in the home?
Yeah. I tried bringing it up a couple times and I would say like, "Hey, you can't tell me that no one's ever gonna love me." Like that's emotional abuse, actually.
Yeah.
And their response was always, "No, it's not. This is just parenting. This is what the consequence of your actions will be, is that no one's ever gonna love you."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so it was hard for me to try to make friends because in my head, I was like, "Well, if the two people who are supposed to love me most in the world are telling me that no one's ever gonna love me, then of course, like, these random people at my lunch table are never gonna like me or love me or be my friend."
Yeah. There's something that I've seen a few times pop up because now that I have a little toddler, I'm following all those pages of like, how does a
Yeah.
child's brain work and how do you effectively parent and discipline in a way that's not going to harm them but give them confidence and boundaries and one of the things that always pops into my head is I don't remember the exact quote, but it's something like the way you speak to your child becomes their inner voice and it becomes how they view themselves, not just their opinion of themselves, but the truth, the reality of how they see themselves. And so you have to give them that reassurance and talk to them in the way that you want them to view themselves as they get older because it's going to stick. It's the wiring of their brain. So if you're not getting that, it's really hard to undo as an adult.
Yeah, you're completely right, and so are the parenting pages. It sets the foundation for how kids view relationships and view themselves.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it is hard to undo.
Did they notice that you were struggling with an eating disorder or self-harm? I mean, obviously, eventually that came up, but I feel like there would probably be signs with the eating disorder that they noticed.
Yes, I'm getting a little bit emotional about this. I struggled with eating disorders and self-harm for about 2 years. So my sophomore year of high school and by the end of my junior year of high school, I had stopped just on my own. And I was making an effort to try to like come clean with my parents and help our relationship. So I first went to my dad with the things I used to self-harm, and I said, "Please take these away from me." And he just took it and put it in like the side compartment of his car, which I drove. And we never talked about it. So I took them back
Yeah.
because I was like, "Oh, well, they're right here." And then later I told my mom, I said, "Hey, I've self-harmed and I am struggling with an eating disorder." And she looked at me and she laughed and she said, "Oh, I know." And I was like, "What?" And she was like, "Yeah, I mean, it's obvious. And you should stop harming yourself because it looks ugly."
Oh my gosh, Alexandra.
Yeah.
So they really were not giving you any sort of support. I guess it's really frustrating to me and shocking to me that especially with them recognizing the signs, they didn't do anything that they could then. But then eventually they're like, "Okay, we're just going to send you away and hopefully someone else can fix it." Instead of clearly they just missed all of the things, all of the steps they could have been taking throughout this time to help you along the way instead of one big extreme answer at the end of all of this.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It was very much 0 to 100 with them because
Yeah.
at the end of my junior year and at the beginning of my senior year when my mental health started deteriorating pretty rapidly, I think just because I'd been so trying so much to keep it together for so long. I was a kid and eventually I couldn't do it anymore. So I wanted to go inpatient in a psychiatric facility and my parents were like, "No, because if that happens, they'll be making medical decisions for you. We won't be able to see you all the time." So they let me do, I think it was intensive outpatient. But to go, because my second program was in October of 2019, a month before I was taken. So for in a month to go from, "No, we're not putting you inpatient because we're not going to be able to see you all the time and they're going to be making medical decisions for you," to go from that to, "We are signing over custody of you to a company and we're sending you across the country.
Yeah.
That's I don't know. That was a huge shift for me because it's like, what do you mean? I thought you wanted me close by.
Before we get into getting into that camp again, I'm wondering if any teachers at school, were you in a public school?
I wasn't a public school. It was the same public school Jack Harlow went to, actually.
So was anybody,
That's completely unrelated.
that's fine.
It's a fun
fact. Was anybody noticing that you were struggling? Was anyone trying to help, any of the teachers, counselors, principal?
People noticed because I was eventually declared truant from school because I kept missing first period. Okay, this is a lot. So I moved out of my parents' house my senior year because it was getting so dangerous for me. And I moved into my best friend's parents' house, even though he was away at college. And his parents were like absolute angels. They took care of me. His dad took time off work so he'd be able to drive me to school every day because my parents had taken away my car. Yeah, they were really sweet. But because we lived so far away from my high school, I ended up usually missing first period. And I'd informed the public school of that. I was like, hey, home life is bad right now. I think it was just because of the bureaucracy, I suppose, of this very large school district that they didn't care. Like, they kept counting me tardy. Eventually that became truancy. And that was also hard for me because I was like, I've explained to you what's going on. I've been a straight A student the first 3 years I was here. It was really hard. So my best friend's parents were very, very good to me. Most of the other adults, not as understanding.
So it seems like the school also dropped the ball.
I would say they did. Maybe they didn't, and there's stuff I was not aware of going on behind the scenes. I know my guidance counselor there was trying to get me, I forgot what they're called, a 504 plan? Like an independent learning plan? I know she was trying to do that. Yeah, it was overall hard.
What was the trigger then for your parents to be like, enough is enough, we're just going to send you away? Was there a moment, something that happened?
I quite frankly don't know. It was a month after I left outpatient, and my best guess is that they saw me coming out of outpatient at the second facility and were like, okay, well, she's not all better immediately. And they got tired of it. I really think the big draw for them, because they knew I'd been struggling for years, right? And I'd been asking for help and they weren't letting me. But I seemed fine. And I think now that I was not living with them, I was being declared truant from school, people were asking them questions. I think that was, in a way, triggering for them because they were very big on the idea of we have to look perfect. We have to be a good family. And now it's very obvious that something is wrong. And I think that was the biggest motivator for them. They didn't want to look like something was wrong anymore.
Right. They just wanted to pull you out of school altogether so that no one could see any of the signs. Let's just bury this problem in Utah.
I think that's what it was, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about that moment that you were kidnapped and you didn't know what the hell was going on.
This is true. Well, hindsight is 20/20. I woke up and I had a text message from my brother, who's 2 years younger than me. And his text message was, Alexandra, call me right now. There's something happening. I need to tell you about it. So I called him and he was already in school, so he didn't pick up. And I was like, huh, that's weird. And then I was supposed to go to the doctor's office. And at first I was like, oh, my friend can drive me. And my dad was like, no, I'm going to pick you up and take you. And I was like, that's also weird because he doesn't do that.
Because you weren't living with them.
Yeah. I have a friend 2 houses down. Why are you taking me to the doctor? After I left the doctor, I tried calling a friend to get a ride to school. And my phone wasn't working because my parents had turned the data off so I couldn't call for help. And this minivan parked and 2 strangers got out and said, are you Alexandra? And I was like, yeah. And they said, you're coming with us. And I said, no, I'm not. And they said, you can come with us the easy way or we will call the police and they'll make you come with us. And my parents were also there. They point out my parents. I'm like, your parents want this to happen. So my parents watched me have a panic attack and hyperventilate and break down, sobbing. Because I was like, what I was told by these people was that I was being sent to a camp because I was a bad kid. And my parents agreed this would make me better. And they were like, if you behave, you'll leave faster. And I was like, okay, I'll behave. I'll be gone for 2 to 3 weeks. That was terrifying.
So they drove you all the way to Utah in that van?
They drove me from Louisville to St. Louis, Missouri, and then we flew from Missouri to Minnesota, and then from Minnesota to Salt Lake City. And looking back, I don't understand why my parents would fly us out of St. Louis unless it was to try to ensure that people who knew me in Louisville, Kentucky, didn't see me in the airport.
What was the look on your parents' faces when you're looking at them like, are you just gonna let this happen, or why are you doing this to me?
I remember them being completely stone-faced, which also confused me.
Yeah.
I have one very clear memory of I'm in the car, and like in the cars they transport kids around in, the child locks are on, and they've taken off the button to press down the window. So there's no way for you to escape. So I was in the car, and I remember looking at my mom as she got into her car and drove away. And I remember just thinking, oh, like this is it.
What did they tell you when you were in the van? Did they specifically say, because you said they mentioned the camp, did they talk to you on the drive? Like, what was that drive like?
I fell asleep.
Okay.
when I get very stressed, I fall asleep. Apparently it happens with children in very stressful situations. And I guess I just carried that over. They were like, do you want to listen to any music? And I was like, nope. And then I knocked out.
Okay. Let's talk about what happens when you pull up to the wilderness camp. Paint us a picture of what you're seeing and what happens next.
Yes. So I had to stay overnight with these strangers in a hotel. Which was also freaky because I wasn't allowed to close the bathroom door. Yeah. Even when I was showering. I had to sleep in the furthest bed from the room, and I shared a bed with a female transporter. So it was me, female transporter, and then male transporter was right by the door. We stayed there overnight at a hotel. I remember talking to the staff because I was like, I have a scholarship due. So like, you have to give me my laptop so I can submit my scholarship application. And they were like, no, we're not going to. And then the next day we ate breakfast, and then I was handed off to people who actually worked at the wilderness program because the transport company is an entirely separate company. So they couldn't even tell me much about what was going on because they didn't know. When I got into the minivan of the people who actually worked for my wilderness program, that was when I really freaked out because that was when I learned I would be there. They said 8 to 10 weeks. I was there for 13 weeks. But I freaked out because like, what? And I'm living in the woods. That was when I first heard about what was going to go on, and I freaked out. I was screaming. I was crying. I kept taking off my seatbelt so they couldn't drive the car.
This was you said October?
This was November 2019.
November. For context, Utah is freezing in the winter. I mean, there's a reason people fly from all over the world to go skiing there. It is cold, it is snowy, it is not fun, and that's why I moved away. Well, one of the reasons. I was like, I hate the winters, I need to escape, and among other things. But just a story for another day. So, okay, so you pull up to this camp, and what do you see? What's going through your mind? Is it like a literal cabin in the woods situation, or are you still kind of in society and then they transport you?
They transport us. It's in Duchesne, Utah, and it starts out with a base camp. My memory is very, very patchy from being taken all the way to being sent. I think because it was so traumatic that I can't remember most of it. I know they had to take me to a clinic, and they like took my blood and did like a physical on me. I know I had to sign a bunch of documents saying that I consented to being there. No, exactly. Yeah.
You can't consent also as a minor anyway. What's the point of a contract when
Exactly.
a minor needs a parent? Well, your parent did sign off on it, but why even have the kids sign anything?
I don't know. And then I remember I had not been suicidal for several months. And I was like, if I hurt myself badly enough, I will be able to leave this place. So a lot of me at the base camp was them physically restraining me because I was trying to throw things at them and bang my head against the wall. So I injured myself enough to be able to leave. So they were like physically holding me back. I almost stayed in base camp overnight because I kept refusing to change. Oh, they strip searched me. That was an important point. And they confiscated every single one of my belongings. I always have a notebook but I asked them if I could keep the notebook with me because it was like, it helped me calm down to doodle and journal when I was stressed. And they were like, no. And then I always carry hair ties on me. And I said, can I keep one of my hair ties, please?
Yeah.
And they said no.
I mean, that's a totally reasonable request to have a hair tie when you're going to be up in the mountains. So they strip searched you, take everything. What do they make you wear? What do they put you in?
They give you gear. So I think it was 3 sports bras, 7 pairs of underwear. You get sweatpants and waterproof pants to go over that. And then for shirts, you have 1 shirt for the week, 1 coat, pair of gloves, sun hat, beanie. Yeah, you're wearing the same clothes all week, except for socks and underwear.
At this point, is it sinking in that you're about to be camping for this entire time?
No, that doesn't hit for weeks. I
Oh,
truly,
no.
which is what a lot of people who are in these programs go through, is like, okay, if I just either act out enough or refuse enough or do well enough, I will be able to leave. So I first was at the act up stage, and then I moved into the if I'm just good enough, right? Because logically, I'm like, I've gotten straight A's my whole life. I'm an honor roll student. You know, what I kept saying was, this is a mistake. Like, my parents are going to clear things up. This is a misunderstanding. I'm like, I'm a very good kid, guys. So I tried being like the best kid in wilderness. I was very cooperative. I was very kind, which I am usually, but I was crying a lot, and I was trying very hard to still be pleasant, even though I was crying.
I think it's important to mention you pinned a comment because people, obviously the comments were going nuts on your post. And you're like, okay, let's talk about why kids are even sent here in the first place. You don't have to list all of them, but from your memory, some of the reasons, ridiculous to serious, why are kids sent there?
So my wilderness program, they have an entire page that just says whom we treat, and it lists all the conditions they say that wilderness therapy can help. We have depression and anxiety. We have bipolar disorder, which is in the same group as depression and anxiety. We have NLD and Asperger's, neither of which have been official DSM diagnoses since I think the 2010s. But they're claiming wilderness therapy can help with like autism spectrum traits. Gaming addiction, poor grades, low self-esteem, life adjustment problems, whatever that means, grief. Like, if you can think of any sort of mental problem, they claim that they treat it. Which is, it can't be true, right? If you're in a program that helps with bipolar disorder, how is the treatment helping bipolar disorder also going to help post-traumatic stress disorder or being addicted to video games? Like, that can't correlate.
Yeah. So what were you actually doing that they thought was going to cure you of whatever your parents said you needed to be there for?
My official diagnoses, which they listed in my discharge papers, were depression, anxiety, and family life issues.
They didn't even mention the self-harm or eating disorder.
Nope.
I feel like that's important information for them to know.
They did know, because I would talk about it. I'd say, I can't eat this. It's hard for me to eat. What I noticed a pattern in both of my programs, that unless you were coming in with a diagnosis other than depression or anxiety, I didn't know anyone who was diagnosed with anything else while they were there. For context, since leaving, I've been diagnosed with ADHD and post-traumatic stress disorder.
So what did a day-to-day look like? Were all the days the same, or what did they have you do while you were there?
We had hiking days and we had non-hiking days. We usually hiked every other day. If it was a hiking day, we woke up, we had breakfast, we broke down the camp, which involved packing, tarps, sleeping bags, getting rid of the campfire, which meant smashing all of the coals and embers and scattering them to leave no trace. And then we hiked like all day because we were wearing these giant backpacks that were like 60, 70 pounds. So it took us, which was like half of our body weight, by the way, as teenagers. More than half sometimes.
Yeah.
So it would take us hours and hours to hike a couple of miles because our packs were so heavy. And then we'd get to our camp, we'd set up camp, we cooked dinner, and then we went to bed. And then twice a week, we had quote unquote Billy bath days, which was our only available form of washing. We got 2 tins of water about the size of this tissue box, and we had a little tent, and we had 15 minutes to stand in the literal dirt on the ground and wash ourselves with these 2 lukewarm tins of water.
That sounds horrible. Hold on. If you have ever been camping in Utah, I have been camping in the winter. I don't know why we did this as a family to torture the children. No, it was fun in some ways, but to shower, I'm pretty sure I didn't shower the whole time because I'm like, you can't pay me to get
Yeah.
naked in this cold. It is freezing.
We were also not just in Utah in the winter, we were in the Uinta Mountains
Oh my gosh.
in winter. So there was
So
snow on the ground, like 90%
I was just gonna
of the
say there
time.
was snow then. Yeah.
It was freezing. It was very, yeah. And we were, I don't know, I know blue collar workers who work dirty jobs experience this, but we developed permadirt.
What's that?
If you are dirty enough for long enough, the dirt starts like adhering to your skin and you can't get it off. So like no matter what, no matter if I just had a Billy bath, I could rub my skin, even the back of my hand, and dirt would like flake off in chunks.
Okay, I feel like so you did this for 13 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane to me. That is insane. I have so many questions. First, that sounds like hazardous conditions for people, especially if they have any sort of mental condition. Were there people who needed medical attention after all of this hiking and exerting and just everything that you're being made to do?
Yes. So if you were sick, they just ignored you. They'd first of all accuse you of faking it, of saying you're trying to get out of hiking by being sick. I remember vividly, my friend and I both got either really bad colds or the flu or something at the exact same time, and they made us hike anyways. Because they're like, you're fine, just like suck it up, you can do this. Another girl who was there got a staph infection on her bottom while she was there, which is it's a bacterial infection. It requires cleaning
Yeah.
and antibiotics. They sent her to the doctor. She was there for one night, and then she came right back up. And as a 14 or 15-year-old, she was in charge of changing all the bandages and cleaning her infection herself. Yes. And one of my other friends sprained his ankle, and they took him down, had his ankle in a brace, and then took him back up to the mountains, and they would just drive him between camps instead of hiking until he healed. So there was really no injury you could get and that you could leave. They just kept you there.
Yeah. And this is probably a really dark question. Did anyone try to harm themselves to the capacity of having to leave?
This is another thing that my wilderness program claims they do, but they don't. So on their page, they say we do not accept people who are actively self-harming or have active attempts. And there was a girl who came right before I left who started self-harming with rocks and sticks and like her nails. And the staff just kept her there. The only time, there were 2 times that people did leave and not come back. One of them, I assumed something like on her medical tests had come back because she was there. She came during the night, and then the next day she left and she was gone. We weren't allowed to ask what happened to her or where she went or if she was coming back, but she never did. The second girl, she was there for a couple of weeks and she just refused to do anything. She wouldn't hike, she wouldn't drink, she wouldn't eat. She wouldn't use the bathroom, so staff started force feeding her laxatives. Yeah. And then after a couple of weeks of that, she was removed. We weren't allowed to ask where she went or if she was coming back, but she also never did. But those were the only 2 times that I knew of people leaving.
Was this an all-girls camp?
It was an all-girls camp. We had male staff sometimes. That was a whole other thing. Because a lot of the girls in the program had already experienced sexual trauma, including me. So we had a male staff, and I and one of my friends said, hey, can he please not sleep in the tent with us?
Yeah.
Because it makes us very uncomfortable. And the female staff told us that it would be good practice for us to be reaching our therapeutic goals.
No, they did not.
And they said if we
Are they
refused,
trying to claim exposure therapy?
and they told us if we refused, it was a sign that we weren't ready to leave the program.
Oh my gosh. That's like, okay, that's next level insanity. When you have girls who were sent there, most likely because they were traumatized because of certain events that happened to them with a male, and then forcing them to sleep next to this stranger, this other man, and saying that if you don't do it, that is insane. Were these people even qualified therapists, counselors, psychologists, any of that?
No, they were all my age, probably younger actually.
What?
Most staff were between 19 and 22, 23. And most of them only stayed for a year because it's very hard on your body. Not to speak of whatever mental gymnastics you have to go through to work at these programs, but it's difficult on your body to be outside in the mountains in the winter in Utah. So many of the staff who were there for longer periods of time developed like circulation issues in their hands and feet. They developed skin conditions because it damages your body.
How?
So a lot of this.
Sorry.
No.
Okay. How are they convincing parents that this is therapy that's going to fix their child if it's literally run by teenagers who don't know what the hell they're doing? Like, what? How do you say we are certified, trained professionals to help your kids if you're literally not? I don't understand how they're getting parents to agree to this.
Have you heard of WASP?
It's familiar. It sounds familiar.
The big troubled teen programs used to be called. I'm going to look up the Worldwide Association of Specialty Programs and Schools.
Yes.
That was called WASP, and their whole shtick was that you're quote-unquote accredited if you're a member of WASP. So schools were able to go around and say, no, like, we're fine because we have this accreditation. And WASP has fallen out of favor because so many of its programs, which existed mostly in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, were so explicitly abusive that they've shut down. But now we have NATSAP, which is, I believe, the National Association of Therapeutic Schools and Programs. So NATSAP is the new WASP, and both of my programs were able to brag that they're accredited members of NATSAP.
So what is that, like a certification? Like you go online and you take a quiz?
Yeah, or you buy them. You, at the bottom of most troubled teen programs, they'll be like, we're members of this, we're members of this, we're members of this, which you buy. You can just purchase it and say, see?
Jesus.
We belong now. And then there's also the argument of like, you know, it's very like Henry David Thoreau-esque. It's like you're in nature and like the healing power of the woods.
Okay, but not when you're surviving. Sure, like take me to a place where my body is not in fight or flight and my nervous system is actually calm. Then maybe the wilderness is beneficial, but not while you're fighting for your life.
No,
and you're exerting yourself and you're freezing and your body hurts.
Yeah.
So how are they feeding you there? What was the food like?
So my wilderness therapies program's big claim is that they gave us 3,000 calories a day of diverse food, like eggs, bacon. I did not see an egg the entire 3 months we were there. And also, if you think about it, it makes no sense because they have to transport the food to us in the mountains. How are you going to drive eggs up into the mountains every few days and have us travel with them while we're hiking and ensure that the eggs don't break? It's impossible. So breakfast was always, I have a tub of Vaseline right here. If people are watching, I have this large tub of Vaseline. We had a stainless steel metal camping cup, and that was where all our food was served. So breakfast every single day was called GNO, which is granola and oats. They would fill our little tin, which was about this size. They'd fill it about 3/4 of the way with dry granola and dry oats. And then we got 1 tablespoon of brown sugar. And that was breakfast every single day.
Wait, they didn't even give you milk or anything to put in it?
We had some powdered milk, but it would take so long to like heat it up on the fire and serve it that then staff would be like, well, you're delaying us from breaking down camp and leaving by using milk. So most of us never used milk because Yeah, the staff would shame us and the other students would shame us because they were like, yeah, you're delaying us.
Raw oats, though?
Yeah, like raw oatmeal.
How do you even get that down?
Water. A lot of water.
Okay, so that's breakfast.
Lunch was a whole thing because every week for lunch, at least once a week, they would serve us pork. And I'm Jewish, and one of my friends in the program was Muslim. And in both of our religions, we can't eat pork. So every week, it was a little dance we'd do with the staff where we'd say, hey, can you ask them to send us something besides pork, please? Because we can't eat this. And the staff would say, no, sorry, like there's nothing we can do. Once a girl in our program got mad at the two of us. So she ate a bunch of the pork and then started touching all of the cutting boards and knives and like waving her hand in our faces. So anyways, I digress. Lunch was usually, it could be pork, it could be like bagels and cream cheese, it could be peanut butter, but it was a very basic, like carbs and a little bit of protein. And then dinner almost all the time was dehydrated black beans and rice. Sometimes we had pasta. Sometimes they served us vegetables, but often the vegetables were spoiled. I got sick a couple of times because of that.
Oh, geez. So with all of this, how are you managing with your eating disorder? You just tell me how it was affecting you with that food.
It was hard. It did improve because I couldn't not eat because I would get sick. Like if you're hiking miles a day and you're freezing to death, not to death, but you're freezing, and it's like you have to eat. I think I was the thinnest I ever was, proportionally, as a young adult at that point, because they, just listening to what I'm saying, they fed us every single day. That's nowhere close to 3,000 calories, and it's also like not enough protein and fats to give to someone who is carrying a 60-pound hiking backpack and hiking 5 miles a day in the middle of winter in the mountains. So we all lost like a considerable amount of weight.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Something that you mentioned in your video is that you had to clean your utensils with dirt.
Yes. So after we finished eating a meal, we just walked away from the camp. We picked up dirt and we rubbed dirt around the inside of our cups. And then at night, one person would boil water and we would dip our cups in boiling water for 10 seconds. And that was the extent of cleaning. We weren't allowed to use water for cleaning unless stuff was really stuck on. And we showed the staff, and the staff approved it.
Were there any therapy sessions, like actual let's sit down and do group circle?
We had a therapist come in once a week, and we had 1 hour-long session with a therapist. And then we would occasionally do group therapy, which was like reading a packet they gave us about like catastrophizing or like mental heuristics. And we would go around and be like, I experience black and white thinking when I do this. And then a constant was a feedback group, which was honestly a form of attack therapy. Someone would say, I'd like to call a feedback group, and everyone else had to stop what they were doing immediately and gather around the person. And the person would say, Alexandra, are you open to hearing feedback? And you couldn't say no. Technically you could be like, no, I'm not. But then the person would call another group like 3 hours later and say, are you now open to receiving feedback? And the person's feedback could be anything. And you had to sit there and say, okay, like, thank you for your feedback.
That sounds like it would get really intense with a bunch of girls on a mountain.
The worst one is I cooked apples in a way that someone else did not like. Apples. So then she called a feedback group and was like, it really hurt and traumatized me that you cooked the apples in this specific way. And I had to be like, okay, like, I hear you. I apologize for cooking apples. It got worse in my second program, actually, but it was...
Did it ever get really spicy and catty, girls who just didn't like each other?
It got hard to do that because there was no one else there, You're living with these girls 24/7. They've seen, like, the worst of you. It's very difficult not to bond or to even hate someone because it's like... There's a community that has a joke that's like, the worst place to get in a fight is a tent because what are you going to do, slam the flap? It's like that. Like, there's...
The aggressive zip.
Yeah. Like there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
Oh, this was another thing. They told us that we couldn't experience anger, that anger was a secondary emotion. And when we felt angry, we were actually experiencing sadness, so we should be sad, or jealousy, so we should be jealous. And like as women, and girls, you're already kind of conditioned to try to not experience anger,
Mm-hmm.
But then there's another level of like, actually, you never experience anger because it's not a real emotion.
Oh my gosh. This is so nonsensical.
It was, but it also worked because it made us much more compliant. Because showing anger, expressing anger, was a sign that we had to stay in the program longer because we were less developed emotionally. That was a very common thing. If we ever complained about the program, we said, this isn't working for me, we were told that we were going to stay longer because we hadn't accepted.
Is that what happened to you?
Yes. Yes, it was. I resisted them for a very long time. I kept saying, this doesn't work. It doesn't make sense why this would work. I want to go home. So the average stay is 8 to 10 weeks, 8 to 12 weeks. I was there for 13. They called me resistant.
Who wouldn't be resistant? That's the thing that drives me crazy about these programs is they're not focusing on fixing behavior. They're focusing on compliance. They're focusing on submission. And what does that accomplish? It just teaches them never to trust their own instincts. It teaches them to be small. It teaches them to accept bad behavior and even abusive behavior from anyone who's in an authority position, anyone who claims they're over you. It's just setting you up for failure in life. It's not teaching you how to stand up for yourself. It's not teaching you how to work through emotions. It's just teaching you how to be silent.
Yes, I completely agree. It's teaching us how to be silent. It's absolutely brainwashing, and it's grooming us to accept bad behavior from people in positions of authority because we can't talk to the authorities. All of our communication with our parents is monitored, and you're taught that like whatever these staff say is right, and I am by default wrong.
Yeah.
At my second program especially, I spoke to a lot of girls who were treated very inappropriately by the staff there, and they assumed it was normal because it's like, okay, well, I'm wrong by default.
Yep.
My second program is actually being sued, I think in 2 different lawsuits right now, because there was a therapist who was there while I was there who was being very sexually inappropriate towards the students.
Oh my gosh.
The staff and the administration allegedly knew, and there are allegedly like notes and emails of them informing the director of this program that this therapist was doing that. And they let him go eventually, didn't arrest him. And then this year he was arrested because he was doing similar things to clients in his own private practice.
Wow. Is it time to talk about the second one? Do you feel like we covered the wilderness therapy enough?
I could talk about wilderness therapy for hours. I also want to be cognizant of that. You have a limited amount of time.
Okay. So you finally get out of this program and you're probably thinking, okay, it's time to go home. And then what happens?
What my therapist at my wilderness program told me was I was like, I want to see my best friend. I want to see his family. I love them. And she was like, you'll be able to see them if you behave. And I was like, perfect. And then I behaved. 2 or 3 weeks before I was scheduled to leave, what these programs do is they'll start off by saying your kid needs to be in wilderness therapy 10 to 12 weeks max. And then about like halfway, 2/3 of the way through those 10 to 12 weeks, they go to the parents again and they say, hey, your kid's just not ready to come home. We're afraid they're going to relapse into past And I was like, am I going to relapse into anxiety? Like what? They're going to relapse into past behaviors. And they can't go home. It's very dangerous for them. So we recommend they go to another program for 1 to 4 years.
Are these two companies connected? Because it kind of seems like it.
Nothing on paper. However, the director of one of my friend's programs, her residential program, is married to the director of our wilderness program. There are many, many staff who go between programs. There are many therapists who go between programs. And it's also, many of these programs are in Utah, and it's a huge source of revenue for them. They want to continue the revenue, and continuing the revenue means keeping kids in these places. I haven't even touched on educational consultants who recommend kids are sent there and then get kickbacks from the program, either monetarily or the program will just happen to host a really nice conference in an awesome hotel and all these delicious catered meals are free. And educational consultants just happen to go there and are told that if they do send kids to these programs, more of these conferences will happen. 2 of my friends and I have compared our little discharge recommendations, and it's the exact same, word for word. We all went to the same wilderness therapy program, 10 years apart. And it's the exact same. It says, we are afraid that insert name is at risk of relapsing into past behaviors if they are sent home. We recommend them going to a residential program where they can further learn skills.
When did you find out that you weren't going home?
About 3 weeks before because I was also 17 and a half at the time. So my assumption was that they're not going to send me to another program because I'm only going to be there for a couple of months.
Yeah.
Nope. And then my therapist also told me at that time, she was like, I just don't think it's a good idea. It's not therapeutically appropriate, was her term, for you to see your best friend and his family with whom you were living. It apparently also wasn't therapeutically appropriate for me to see my little brother. I had to earn the right to talk to him in wilderness therapy. I didn't see him for 6 months. So my parents flew to Utah and drove me from my first program to my second program.
Still in Utah?
Yes. My second program is in Urda, Utah. So many of these programs are in Utah. I remember all of the houses at my second program had a room specifically for kids to cry in because it happened so often. And it was called the pretty room. So I was sitting in the pretty room with my parents.
The pretty room?
Yeah.
Hold on, why do they call it the pretty room? Just
Because
call
after
it what
you
it
leave,
is.
you look pretty. I know. Well, they can't call it the crying room because that scares the parents.
Oh my gosh.
A room of doom
Okay.
and despair. So I was in the pretty room with my parents, sobbing and begging them and saying, I was 17. I was like, I'm so sorry. I'll be a better kid. Please take me home.
What was this place like? Did it feel like a psychiatric ward? Was it campy, cabiny?
From the outside, it looks like a gated, community. Nice houses. We had stables for horses. We had one really large building, which was the school. From the outside, all the houses looked normal. From the inside, I was like, maybe the architects who construct homes for the fundamentalist LDS church also construct homes for these people. Because the downstairs is normal and the upstairs looks like dorms.
Interesting.
It was 6 rooms, and each room had 2 beds. Between the beds, there was half a wall. So you couldn't see your roommate. And then at night, there were heat-sensitive alarms that staff turned on, so you couldn't leave your room.
What if you had to go to the bathroom?
You had a little button above your bed, and you had to press the button, and it rang to the staff bedroom, and the staff would have to wake up, unalarm your room. You went to the bathroom, and they put you back in bed. And sometimes staff didn't like being woken up in the middle of the night, so some staff reacted to bathroom calls in a way where they were trying to deter us from using the bathroom. So there's a staff in another building, another home, was what they called them, who every time someone rang up to use the bathroom, she unalarmed every single door. She turned on all the lights. She made all the girls stand outside in the hallway and wait for the other person to finish using the bathroom.
Oh, geez. That's
Yeah.
humiliating.
It was. And then I remember asking, well, what if I'm sick? What if there's an emergency and I get up to use the bathroom? Will I be in trouble? And they were like, yes. And I said, okay, well, what if there's an emergency and I throw up on my floor or something because I'm not using the bathroom? Will I get in trouble? And they said, yes. And I said, so what are my options here?
Yeah. So what was it like on a day-to-day basis here? Did you have to wear special uniforms? Was it very regimented?
No special uniforms. Yes, very regimented. I talk about my second program a lot less. I think because wilderness therapy, it's more obvious. You're like, oh, I was forced to live in the woods and hike, and I lost feeling in my hands and feet. And people are like, oh, yes, that's clearly bad. And then I get to the second program, and I'm like, I sleep in my bed. I have showers. There's a school that I go to. And it was psychologically a lot worse for me to be there. And it's hard for people to understand that, because materially it was better.
Physically, it was better. But mentally,
physically it was
not.
better. Mentally, it was worse. So the day-to-day is you get up, you do your morning chores. So you have 21 minutes in the morning to get ready. 7 of those minutes are your bathroom time, where you do your bathroom chore and like brush and change. And then 14 minutes are in your room cleaning. And then the peer manager, who is in charge of everyone's chores, has to check you off and say your room looks good. Then you go downstairs and you have 20 minutes to eat breakfast and make your lunch. And then you have 20 minutes to do your downstairs chore. And then you're in school. School, because the girls there were ages from like 13 to 19, the curriculum was geared more towards middle schoolers because they can't like teach calculus to 13-year-olds, you know? So school was pretty easy. And after school, teachers had like given you points based on how you did in school. So you entered those into your points system, which was, you know, the Scantrons where like you fill in bubbles? It was like that. So you had specific skills that you were assigned, and staff had to interact with you every day, and you would earn points for good behavior and you lost points for bad behavior. If you lost enough points in a day, you were no privs or no privileges, and you had to sit at the kitchen table and either do homework or read like one of the 3 textbooks they had under the counter and not speak to anyone for 24 hours. Yeah, and you could lose points for things like forgetting to open the blinds in your room.
Did it feel like walking on eggshells? Like you just were afraid to break a rule?
All the time. I was terrified. And there are also cameras in the house, so they can watch you even when, like, you're not aware. Walking on eggshells all the time. It was very stressful.
How long were you there again?
I was there for 6 months. The only reason I was able to leave the second program after 6 months instead of like the 1 to 4 years people are usually there is not because I turned 18. I got there in February of 2019, and by August of 2020, I had completed all the credits necessary to graduate high school in Utah, and they couldn't keep me past that. But when you turn 18 there, people assume that you can leave. Most of the time, you can't. The rumor going around was that if you sign yourself out, they just take you to the nearest homeless shelter, and they leave you there. There was a girl who tried to leave, and they confiscated her phone, and they wouldn't let her like call any of her friends to let them know where she was or to come get her. And also, like, you don't have a lot of money, but your money, your phone, your ID are all locked away in the office. I could have signed myself out and I would have had no money, no ID, no cell phone, no high school diploma, and I'm stranded like thousands of miles away from my home.
Were you allowed to call parents throughout your time?
Yes, you are required to call your parents twice a week on the landline. And if you were on the lowest level of privileges, the staff had to sit with you and monitor you as you made the phone call. Once you got to the middle level of privileges, you could talk to them on your own, but staff would still come around and like listen to make sure you weren't calling anyone else.
Did you ever tell your parents, "This is hell, please get me out of here"?
In Wilderness, I did a lot. There was an entire month during Wilderness where I wasn't allowed to contact my parents at all because I'd written them a letter that just told them, you know, we clean things with dirt, and also my hair freezes when I get it wet because it's so cold. And my therapist came to me and said my letter was very manipulative and I wouldn't be allowed to talk to my parents until I could communicate with them in a more constructive manner.
Oh.
So by the time I got to the second program, it was just like, yeah, like this is life, I guess. When I spoke about like the grooming and the brainwashing earlier, I'd been so primed to accept the absolute worst conditions. By the time I had better, I was just like, great, you know, like I can shower. My skin isn't dirty all the time.
Is there anything else you want to share about your time in there before we talk about what happened when you got home?
I think I want to explain how it was worse for me than wilderness therapy. The brainwashing was much more complete by the time I got to the academy, my second program. A lot of it was because of wilderness. I'd been told by staff they were surprised I was sent to wilderness first because wilderness, this is a quote, wilderness is meant to break kids. And I wasn't a bad kid, so I didn't see why I needed to be broken. But the conditions were so much better. And I wanted to do well because the other threat is like, if you don't do well here, we're sending you back to wilderness.
Ooh.
And then you'll come back here. Yeah. And I was like, I don't want to go back to wilderness. So I was much more ready to like believe everything they told me and go along with it. So I came out of my second program much more brainwashed.
And by that, you basically mean compliant and submissive.
Compliant and also convinced that like I was a bad kid and I did deserve
Mm.
this and I needed it and these people are helping me get better.
Did you get better? I know that's a stupid question because it doesn't really seem like these things are helping anybody. But as far as on the outside, on the surface, because you were just being more compliant, did you feel, because you were brainwashed to feel like you needed it, did you feel like your mental symptoms were improving?
Yes, I would attribute that to the fact that I was removed from a very stressful and dangerous situation and put into a different one. But it was a different kind of stress and danger. So I struggled less with things I was struggling with before I was in the program. And then I left and I was struggling with a new host of things. I was very angry a lot of the time, and I didn't understand why. I had terrible nightmares. I had very intense flashbacks and panic attacks. And that also confused me because I'd been told that these programs had helped me, right? I'd been told that I was better and I was mentally healthy. But then I was having all these reactions. Is this what better feels like? Is this what healthy feels like? Because it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of confusion. And because I'd repressed my emotions for so long, I would have these flashes of fear and anger, and I wouldn't understand why. And I would just lash out to the people around me because I didn't understand it was coming from my trauma.
Did you ever express to them in any sort of therapy sessions what had happened to you when you were a teen that started all of this or that amplified your mental instability?
We've talked about it. I was no contact with my parents for 2 years. One of the reasons I wore the mask initially was because I was like, I don't think my parents are going to react well to me having this account. So it's better to stay anonymous. They found it, of course, because they're my parents. And like, if your child puts a mask over the lower half of their face, that's not going to stop you from recognizing your child, you know? And they said, we want you to take down your accounts because it's making us look bad. And I think 19 or 20 years old, said, I will delete all of my accounts if y'all go to therapy. And they refused. And not only did they refuse, but they cut me off. So they stopped paying my college tuition. I pay my own phone bill now. I'm on Medicaid because I went off of their insurance. But in those 2 years where I did not speak to them, they started working on themselves and getting help. Restarted contact fairly recently. I did go home and visit them for the first time in 3 years because our family dog was passing away. And that was interesting. Not the dog, that was very sad, but just being with them. Yes. So we've spoken about it since then.
Okay. That was all great to know. I was initially meaning if you talked to the counselors about that. But that's okay. I wanted to get to that anyway, so
Yeah.
we did.
Mhm.
But I guess I was wondering, did your counselors understand what you were emotionally and mentally dealing with that incited all of these problems or amplified these problems that you were already having? Because it seems like they weren't really getting to the core of all of these emotions that you were feeling.
No, that's a really good point. They weren't, because these programs are based on behavior modification, which is the same way like you train a dog. Like if a dog pees somewhere, you get a shot collar or something, and if the dog, you know, goes to the bathroom outside, you give him a treat. It's that. It's rewarding behaviors you want to encourage and punishing behaviors you don't like. But all the real issues are still there. And no, the counselors didn't listen because they didn't believe me. At my first program, I went in and I was like, my parents are abusive. I have documentation of it. And my therapist at my first program told me that I was playing the victim and I wouldn't be able to leave until I wrote a letter of accountability where I took accountability for the role I played
What?
in my parents treating me like this.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. It's so aggravating. All of this is firing me up so much because it's probably the case that most of these kids who were there because they were in a toxic situation at home that was not being managed or taken care of, because their parents were like, you know what, we can't deal with you, just someone else needs to fix you, quote, fix you, not taking accountability that there might be something wrong at home. And that's not always the case, I'm sure. However, it seems like a lot of these kids were there and just all of their problems were going untreated and being made worse because of a situation that started with the home life.
Yep, exactly right. We had a disproportionate number of kids in both my programs who were either adopted or had been in foster care and then sent here.
Mm-hmm.
Any of the survivors I've talked to at my programs and beyond, none of them had a good relationship with their parents going into it. Like either, they were in foster care or they were adopted and their parents like hid it from them or treated them differently from their biological children.
Mm-hmm.
Or the parents like had a very messy divorce, or the parents were abusive or neglectful in some way. I've never met a survivor who had a good relationship with their parents before going into the program.
Yeah.
And some of it you can say, well, yeah, because they were, misbehaving. So of course their relationship with their parents wouldn't be good.
But why were they misbehaving?
Yes, exactly. It's like a kid has so little control over their lives if they suddenly start acting out. I think that's the time to investigate what else is going on in their life.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And just like we illustrated with your story, all of the signs were there for your parents to step in to help you in multiple ways, and they chose to ignore it. And then all of a sudden you're deemed a bad kid when in reality you just weren't getting the help and the support that you needed. Now, I understand there may be cases where parents are also overwhelmed or going through their own things and they're missing the signs and they're doing their best, but their kid just isn't getting the love and support, and it's not at the fault of the parent because they're in their own stress. That doesn't excuse it, but I can understand where that might be the case. It just seems like there are so many scenarios where parents are dropping the ball and then just trying to put a Band-Aid on the wound that they created, but it's actually just making the wound bigger. There is no Band-Aid. It's not helping. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken arm, sending them to these places because they're going to come back and just not talk about the broken arm and be like, yep, everything's fine, because that's what they've been taught to do. They haven't been taught to process anything. They haven't been taught to understand where the behavior is coming from. They're just taught to be different.
Yeah, exactly. I think the broken arm analogy is a really, really good point, because it's like the parent breaks the kid's arm and these programs come in and they comfort the parent and they go, no, like you didn't break the kid's arm. Something's wrong with the child's bones.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just give your child to us and pay us tens of thousands of dollars,
Right.
which then we haven't even gotten into. These programs are incredibly expensive. Just pay us this many dollars and we're going to figure out what's wrong and your kid's going to be fixed. And it's like all they do in these programs to this kid is force the kid to do things with a broken arm.
Mm-hmm.
And the kid comes out and their arm is still broken or it's healed very badly, but they've been taught they have to continue acting like everything is normal.
When you got home, so I imagine you went back to your parents' house. What was the dynamic there? Did they feel like, oh, we're so glad that we did that because look at you, you seem fine? Or did you appear worse than when you came in or when you went in?
I live with my best friend a little bit still after I left, and then I started feeling very guilty because I was like, oh, I mean, like they already have 3 kids. I can't, I felt bad about also being there. So I did move back in with my parents. It was strange. From their perspective, they definitely thought that I was better. If they thought I was acting better, it was because I was so terrified of them sending me back that I acted however they wanted me to.
Mm-hmm.
Because also, these programs exist in Utah for young adults, like 19 to 25. So there's always the fear of like, they could send me back. They have the power to send me back. And I'm going to do whatever I can to ensure that doesn't happen.
Yeah. And they probably use those as success stories to be like, oh, my child's completely changed. I would do it over 1,000 times and it was a little difficult for them, but they're just a little angel now. No, they're just scared and traumatized.
Yes, one of my mutuals is called like the ex-poster child, and that was sort of the same experience I went through of a full year where I was like, these programs were good. Like, I needed them. They were important. My academy has a reunion every single summer. And the year after I graduated, I went to the reunion. I filmed the testimonial for the academy about how good and helpful it was and how grateful I was. Yeah. It wasn't until like a year and a half, 2 years after I left, I started going, maybe kids shouldn't be in the woods. Like, maybe that didn't help me actually.
What was it that woke you up to that realization?
TikTok.
Yeah?
Yes, I saw other people posting about their experiences. And it was this mental process of, oh yes, I can objectively understand why that wasn't good for them, but I still benefited. And then it was like, well, I'm still having nightmares and panic attacks and like anger issues, which I've never had before. So maybe I'm not better. And then I started speaking to these people, other survivors, and they also described going through the sort of the same process where they came out and they believed that they were better. And the more they researched these places and the further distance they got from the brainwashing, the more they were like, oh, this was bad actually. Like this harmed me. It was a process of undoing the brainwashing, and I think I still am.
The mental manipulation it takes to convince a survivor or a victim that what happened to them was for their own good, that's a lot. It takes a lot to be able to convince someone that, no, I know this is hard and it's painful, but it's all for your own good and you're better for it. That's a really scary place to be. Drop that scenario into any other high control group. Let's drop it into the FLDS. Warren Jeffs is spiritually marrying, well, now he's in prison because of it, children as young as 12. And he's convincing them and their parents that no, becoming one of my plural wives is what's best for them. That's what the Lord wants. It's a privilege. It's a blessing. Obviously, from that scenario, everyone can agree that's horrific and that's wrong. So why can't we apply those same things to these very harmful programs where people, not in like a physical abuse type of way, but a mental abuse, emotional abuse? Why can't we understand that sending a child to that and saying, no, this is for your own good. I know it's hard. I know it's terrible, but it's for your own good. Why can't we see that that's the same thing, just disguised differently?
Yeah, and to your earlier question about are these places in Utah, does it relate to like
Mormonism?
LDS Mormon Church? Yes, I think it does, and I think it makes sense that people can be like, oh, FLDS was bad, but this is fine. A lot of these programs are in Utah for a reason. Of course, part of it is like there's a lot of really beautiful land, open like Bureau of Land Management land that's publicly available. A lot of outdoors things can be spread out. And also a lot of it is the culture of Utah and the LDS church of I'm not LDS, but I was told by a friend who left the church that it's like considered a sin to question things. Like questions come from Satan.
Yeah, it's compliance-based. It's the
Yeah.
compliance and fear-based religion and guilt-based religion
Mhm.
that masquerades as perfection. And if you're not presenting perfection, it's probably because you've fallen out of favor with Heavenly Father and he's punishing you in some way and you better do something to get right with him, which is basically the same setup for these troubled teens. Well, life's not good, which means you're probably doing something wrong, which means you just need to fix your behavior and do the checklist and then you'll be fine and everything's fine.
Oh gosh, I can't imagine like being raised as a child believing that like God was angry at me and that's why my life is going. Wow.
Yeah, it's a workspace religion to where if things are going wrong, it's probably now people internalize the doctrine different. Not everyone is going to have that deeply held belief. I did because it is taught, but some people don't choose to really take it in as much. But yeah, it was told like if you're having a bad experience, even if you were assaulted, if something's going on in your family, it's probably because you need to pray more, you need to read your scriptures more, you need to go to church more, you need to serve more, you need to tithe more, you need to do these things to be back in favor with God because clearly you're just not worthy of receiving his blessings right now.
Oh my goodness.
That was my childhood. So I can relate to you. Yours was like a very condensed, very concentrated version, I guess, now that I'm thinking about it, of Mormonism in a really extreme way. And mine was just more spread out over my whole life.
Yeah. Oh gosh. See, I say gosh now instead of oh my god, and it's because I kept getting in
In Utah.
trouble and losing points. Yes! That was the biggest thing I got in trouble for. I'd just be like, oh my god, and they'd be like, negative 2,000 points right now.
What? So they did implement their own religious beliefs and biases into the
We
program.
had that. We had prayer time before dinner every night.
Did they wait, hold on. Did they make you pray like Mormons do? Like definitely never the hands together, the palms together like this. It was you fold your arms and then you bow your head and close your eyes. Did they make you do that?
We had to bow our heads and close our eyes, and the staff. Okay, so each house had, this could be like a 5-hour long episode, but each house had family teachers who lived in an apartment connected to the house. My family teachers, while I were there, said, we're going to have a moment of silence before meals instead of prayer time, because they were a little bit more progressive within the LDS faith.
Mm-hmm.
And also half the girls in my house were Jewish. But when the family teachers weren't there was one staff who was like uber Mormon. And she had us all bow our heads and she'd go, Heavenly Father, please bless this meal. Please bless the people at this table.
Hold on. Let me take a crack at the prayer, and I bet you it's almost
Yes.
verbatim.
Okay.
Okay, you ready? This is like the typical cookie cutter saying the prayer in Mormon. So, our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this day. We love everything that you've given us. Thank you for sacrificing yourself for us so that we can be here today. Please bless this food. I have to close my eyes or else I can't get into it. Please bless this food that it will nourish and strengthen our bodies. And please give us the strength to go through this day. We love you so much. We say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. How close was I?
That was like spot on. Oh my
Little
gosh.
triggering.
Oh my gosh. Especially like, thank you. Let this food nourish our bodies. I was
Nourish and
honestly
strengthen is their key word.
yes.
Even if it was brownies.
Yes.
If it was an activity where they're serving brownies, you pray before, please bless this food that'll nourish and strengthen our bodies. That brownie ain't nourishing anything.
Yes. So, oh, that gave me like shivers. Ooh,
Sorry if that was a little
it.
too much.
No, it's okay. But like the Jewish girls and I were all like sneaking looks to each other because we're like, who? So, yeah, I'm also Jewish, and I had a female staff member tell me, my family was murdered in the Holocaust, right? My whole mom's side of the family is gone. But a staff told me when I shared that we have faced similar levels of historic oppression.
No, they did
because
not.
of our
No, they did
religion.
not say that. No, they did not say that.
And I couldn't say, not quite, I would say, actually.
That is actually horrifying that they would say that to you.
I know I had to go along with it. I had to be like, oh, for
Wow,
sure.
I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yikes. Okay, so we haven't even gotten to the aftermath here.
No, I know.
We definitely need to do a live with you. But maybe just to end it a little bit, because I do want to get into your college life. Basically, how you were able to deconstruct and when you started talking about this and the realizations and all of that. And maybe we can cover that in a live and cover a few stories that we missed here today, because like you said, there's so much to talk about. But just to kind of button this up a little bit, can you talk about the relationship with your family now? I know we touched on it a little bit, but has there been any sort of accountability taken? Has there been any sort of recognizing that sending you to these camps was not beneficial and it was harmful?
Yes, there has. My parents have both taken accountability, apologized multiple times for sending me away, and also
Wow.
the way they treated me before. They said that it's their biggest regret in life
Wow.
is sending me to these places. Yes, they're a lot more aware. I told them I was unmasking before I did, and I was like, just letting y'all know this is gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it still is hard, you know? And I also know that I'm very fortunate and in the minority of parents who have owned up to this and apologized, because a lot of parents don't, sadly.
Right. I was gonna say that's very rare, and I could probably count on one hand in the almost 300 interviews that I've conducted how many times parents have apologized or taken back what they did or tried to make amends in any way, shape, or form. So I'm really happy that you've gotten that from them, that even just the acknowledgement of we did something wrong. Can we help make it right? That's a really big deal.
It is. I'm proud of them, which feels strange to say about your middle-aged parents, but yeah, you're right. A lot of parents don't, and I'm proud of them for doing that.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so tell me then how you're doing now. You've unmasked. People are probably like, "Oh my gosh, it's you." And you're able to give a little bit more of yourself. Like you were asking your followers, "What do you guys want to see now?" Now that you can kind of see
Yeah.
anything, like where do we go from here? So,
No,
how are you
no.
doing? How are you feeling? What's your life like now?
I'm doing well. I graduated college this past May, which was like,
Congrats.
thank you. I was so excited. And it is a kind of on social media, where do I go from here? But it's also in a life, sort of, where do I go from here? I'm fresh out of undergrad. I traveled over the summer, but then I moved to New York City. I work at a catering company part-time. I'm an actor, so I'm
Nice.
starting to audition for things, send in, yeah, readings.
The self-tape life. It's not for the faint of
Oh my
heart.
gosh, I hate self-tapes. Can I say that? I
I can give you any sort of advice that I can. I'm still not technically an expert, but I have done it for 10 years, so I can try to help
Are
you.
you an actress
If you
too?
Yeah, I lived in LA for 13-ish years, and I was doing commercial
Wow.
acting and self-taping, and I know it's a whole thing. So after this, I can give you any little tips that may be helpful.
Please. Please, I would love that because anyways, those are my feelings about self-tapes. But yes, it's very exciting for me because this is the first time in my life where I've just been like, I can do anything. I'm 23 and I live in New York City. Like I could, so yeah, it's it's an exciting part of my life, I think.
I love it. Taking control. And also just the fact that you moved to New York City and you're that young and you're just going on this adventure is really proving to me how much you've been able to heal from that experience where you were taught to feel small and worthless and also unlovable from your past. And now you are taking on New York City. That's huge.
It is. I love New York. Yeah, I'm really excited to, yeah.
That's so awesome. Okay, so give me your Linda Listen moment, sassy statement, or to anybody who's pissed you off, or something inspirational for our viewers here.
I don't blame the staff at most of my programs. A lot of them were either very young or like LDS and didn't know better. My therapists at both my programs, I'm holding y'all accountable because they did know better. And instead of using their psychology degrees to help people, they used it to brainwash children.
Mm-hmm.
My inspirational thing I would say is that it can get better. I can't promise that it will, but it absolutely can.
Amazing. Thanks for coming on and sharing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I feel honored that after a couple days of the unmasking that you've come on, I'm like, is this an expose? Are we getting the first interview with
Y'all are
Alexandra?
my first interview. Yes.
That's amazing.
Yay!
Aw, well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for choosing C to C to share your story.
Oh,
I'm so
I love
excited.
y'all's work. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that all of your followers, I'm sure they're all super excited to get a deep dive in your story, and I hope they come over and check it out. And we'll definitely have to do a live stream where we dig a little bit deeper and talk more about college life and the deconstruction process, and also just the mental shift of realizing that you are worthy and that you didn't do anything wrong and you just weren't supported, and how you were able to get to this point. So looking forward to it.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much for having me. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you too. That's tomorrow, right? Is
No,
it
I know. I
tomorrow?
was looking at my calendar and I was like, oh my gosh.
Well, this has been amazing. Any other final thoughts before we go? And then tell everyone how they can find you and support you on Instagram and all the socials.
Those are my final thoughts. On Instagram, I am trail.seasoning. And on TikTok, I'm just trail seasoning. TrailSeasoning.
Perfect. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for watching. Leave those words of encouragement down below for Alexandra. It means so much to us. It's the best way to support the channel, interacting with the posts, liking, sharing, commenting, just watching through a video. Even if it's on mute, it boosts the algorithm and says, hey, your core subscribers like this video. We'll send it to new people, new audience. And we're always trying to build a bigger platform so our guests get the biggest reach when coming on and sharing their stories. And if you want to support further, we have channel memberships now that give you YouTube specific perks like priority responses to comments, a special badge, different emojis that you can use on live streams, and depending on the tier, even dedicated live streams with just the people in that tier. So I'm looking forward to that. And if you want to support in a different way, just like a monthly, you can do Patreon at patreon.com/cults2consciousness. And we have a clips channel if you want shorter, bite-sized versions of our previous guest stories. All of that can be found in the description. Thank you so much for joining us, and I will link 2 more down here below. Until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.